Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Ask Anything presented by Moser Consulting. I'm your host, Angel Leon, Moser's Director of Personnel, and we're glad that you're with us because we have another one of our crowdsourcing episodes. But this time, we're going to be talking to our people about their humble brags, about things that they've done, things that they've experienced, the situations, projects, etc., that they've gone through that make them want to have that little humble brag. And we want to highlight that for them and for you. With me today is producer Brian. Hi, Brian.
Hello. This is a really fun episode to record. I have to actually physically stop myself from going one step beyond saying out loud, "Oh darn," when
Yeah.
like the really reflex is very strong this week. I was like, "Oh, really? Oh wow." There's a lot of cool stuff that people at Moser have done, and it's been very, very fun and surprising sometimes to learn about it. I mean, even some stuff that I knew already, I didn't know the depth to
Exactly. Yeah.
which it goes. I'm like, oh, that was cool when I knew just the intro kind of bare surface of the fact, and drilling down into it and letting people kind of tell their story. It's even cooler than I thought it was.
Yeah. The facial expression in some of these, I think it speaks to our, oh, damn, like in our head when we're talking to these folks, because some of these things are amazing. And I think, a lot of people, when you talk about things like this, they have a little bit of a hard time, right? Talking about the things that they've done and how they got to point A to point B. And once you start getting them to unwind, to get comfortable, then they kind of realize, oh damn, like I really did that myself. And
Yeah,
so
that's the humble part of
yeah,
humble.
yeah, it's a celebration, and people, they don't get to celebrate that often. But then when they start to reminisce as they're talking with us, it's very interesting to see their reactions. So I'm really looking forward to this. But before we get to our guests, I want to bring it here because this man right here, he's got a little bit of a humble brag that he wants to share with us. So Brian, go ahead.
I've done a couple of cool things in my life, you know.
I,
I've,
I'm sure you have.
when I worked in advertising directly years ago at ad agencies, one of my clients was the state of Indiana's anti-tobacco campaign. It was a cool campaign because reducing smoking rates really helps long-term health for population, with
Yeah.
including Medicare and Medicaid costs as people get older, lifelong smokers. Guess what? Amazingly, encounter a higher rate of medical issues as they age. So if you can
Right.
help people get off of tobacco and away from tobacco, they wind up healthier long term, and then that costs everyone less money, which frees up money for the state and people to spend it on things that aren't taking care of people who are experiencing significant health setbacks. I looked it up. We reduced the rate of smoking in adults by 15%, and the rate of youth smoking by 25%, which
Wow.
was very significant long term for Medicare and Medicaid spending for the state of Indiana now and in the future. This was 15 years ago or more. So I mean, that's those numbers have continued to go down. And the other cool thing that I did, not professionally, I mean, I did get paid for it, but it was more of a side and fun thing. When I was in college and after college, I was a comedy writer for Q95's The Bob and Tom Show, the nationally syndicated radio show. I wrote directly for Tom Griswold when I was in college as a comedy writing internship. And then he had me keep in touch with him after the internship ended. Just, hey, if you ever have an idea, go ahead and send it to me. If we use it, I'll cut you a check. And that happened several times. I have material on a couple of their different charity albums. Being a radio comedy program, a number of the things that I wrote, I can't talk about in an office setting. But with this being an Olympic year, I will mention the first thing I ever wrote that made an album for them was a marijuana breakfast cereal called Wheaties,
Oh.
WEED-EZE, and the spokesperson was Ross Ribliotti from the Winter Olympics. It was the first year that they had snowboarding as an Olympic event, and he
Mm-hmm.
got stripped of his medal because he tested positive for THC in his bloodstream. which for snowboarding counted as a performance enhancing substance.
I don't know how.
It's like if he was pulling off those tricks while stoned, I think he should get an additional medal.
Yeah.
But yeah, so writing for Bob and Tom was one of the cool things that I've done in my past, and the state of Indiana's anti-tobacco campaign was another thing that I'm pretty proud of in my career.
No, I mean, both exceptional accomplishments to be honest, but the Indiana anti-tobacco campaign, that I think in my eyes is a very, very, very good higher accomplishment because of what you're doing with people's health and the promotion of that through that. And then the percentages that you guys got after running the campaign is amazing. And obviously I moved here 10 years ago and I don't know how I'm not a smoker, because we see so many people smoking all the time. It's kind of, we laugh about it, but it's not a laughing matter. It's actually a very serious matter. So looking at those numbers is actually I'm very impressed.
And one of the things was always, if they can hook you as a teenager, even younger than 18, and now you have to even be 21 to buy cigarettes, which helps a lot too. But if they can hook you when you're younger, they know that they're probably going to have a lifelong customer. Now, that lifelong is not nearly as long as it would be if you weren't a smoker in most cases. And the thought occurred to me while we were talking, just thinking, they say laughter is the best medicine as far as the Bob and Tom stuff goes, but it turns out that quitting smoking is pretty good medicine too.
Yeah, I'd say that's true.
But I thought of another one that I can talk about. Like when the TV show Prison Break first came on the air, with the guy that went inside and he had like the schematics to the prison tattooed all over his body to help him, break his brother out of jail. Well, I wrote a parody of that called Smoke Break, and that starred Bob Cavoyan, the Bob of Bob and Tom. In the parody, he had the layout of the radio studio tattooed all over his body to help him get out of the studio and out of the building and outside as quickly as possible to be able to smoke a cigarette during commercial breaks.
That's good.
That's literally the only other one that I can talk about at work.
That's good. That's good. Well, Brian asked me to do a little bit on my personal humble brags.
Angel has a very cool humble brag that is about his life prior to coming to Moser. And I was like, you should talk about this. Like, you don't have to get into specifics, but it's a very cool thing that you used to do.
Prior to joining Moser, as Brian said, I used to work for a federal agency. I used to work for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, which is what most people know it as, thanks to the TV shows and movies, etc. Everybody knows what it is. I spent close to 16 years there, and I had the privilege of doing a lot of things that a lot of people probably wouldn't even think about. And a couple of them, in a couple of instances, I was able to represent the United States, so our country, overseas as a diplomat, representing the FBI, and obviously, as I mentioned, the country. I was able to do it in a couple of countries in South America. I'm a Spanish speaker. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, so Spanish is my maternal language. So obviously they thought, hey, this guy speaks Spanish. Why don't we send him to a Spanish-speaking country? Smart, by the way, smart idea, I think, especially when one of your bosses at one time doesn't speak a single word of Spanish. So I think I did all right. I have to say, on my first tour, I worked a lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool cases that, like Brian, I can't really talk about here because of the nature of the work that we were doing. And because honestly, if somebody over there listened to this, they're probably going to they're going to call me in and say, hey, why are you talking about this stuff outside of work? But I can tell you that it was some of the most rewarding work I've ever done in my life, honestly, because you don't realize how respected the United States is as a country, as a whole, until you're really outside of the United States. We live here, we live our day-to-day lives, and we take a lot of things for granted because we live in a country, in the country of the free, right? We're free to do whatever we want. But when you go to places where you don't get the same amenities, when you don't get the same things that we get here, it kind of makes you put life into perspective and what you do into perspective. And I can say that for both of the places where I lived and where I worked on behalf of the US government. It was an eye-opening, not just for me, but for my family too. My family was there, my wife, my kids. It was an interesting time. Some of the work that we did, again, you don't realize how important it is until you have people from other countries that are watching you work say, wow, thank you for helping us catch this bad guy, or thank you for helping us through this process of XYZ. You do a lot of work that's under the radar. Not to get too much into details, but when I was living in Colombia, we also covered the country of Ecuador, which is not US friendly. And so we had a situation where we had an American citizen that was lost, was kidnapped. And so we had to work with some of our counterparts in that country. And we had to do a little bit of work underneath the table, if you know what I mean, to make sure that we got the good guys into their territory to see what we could do. And, we were able to successfully work that out. And we had a very successful operation. But some of those things, nobody hears about it because they never get reported out. It's what I should say. But it was a very interesting part of my life and a very interesting part of my professional career, which bled into a lot of my personal life, because obviously when you're living overseas and you're not just working, you're living in a different country and you're learning another cultural completely. Even though we speak the same language, we're not related. It's not the same Spanish as I grew up with, which is one thing that I can tell you. But yeah, it was a lot rewarding. And then the second time I went overseas, because after my first time, I actually moved here to Indiana, spent about a year and a half here. And then I went back out to Chile, Santiago, the city of Santiago in Chile, all the way down in the Patagonia in South America. So that was a different experience. Chile is more like a European country than really a country of Latin America, but it was really cool. Again, we got to learn from completely different culture, learn a whole lot about them. And fun fact, the southern part of Chile has a huge German population. Don't ask me why. I still to this day don't understand it. I do, because a lot of them moved to south portion of South America after the Nazi Germany was done. So that's what happened. But there are actually huge, I wouldn't call them huge populations, but there's a large number of German descendants down there that even built up their towns, etc., that look a lot like Germany, if you've ever been to Germany.
It's noticeable.
Yeah. It's a very noticeable presence that people that look European and somehow can speak Spanish and German at the same time, which I cannot do. So that is my humble brag. I thank you for asking. I don't get to talk about that a whole lot anymore with people outside of the circle of friends that I still have inside of the government. All right, so we have a few of our consultants that have talked to us for this episode. We have Mark, we have Sarah, we have, of course, you heard Brian, we had Adiola, and we had Tish, and we had Chris, who joined us to talk to us about their experiences and the cool things that they've done throughout their careers and their personal lives. So with us now is one of marketing's own, Tish Gwynn, and she's got a very interesting story that I'm very curious about. Tish, you were a college basketball player. Did you start? Did you come off the bench? I had so many questions, but come on, just tell us.
I went to Pike High School, actually, on the west side of Indianapolis. I think it was my junior year. They were actually there to see someone else, and they saw me play. And so they offered me a full scholarship. And I had gotten offers from like Penn State and a couple other places. Here's the funny thing. One of the places I got an offer from was an Ivy League. I had no idea what the school was, and I didn't know it was an Ivy League. So I never even entertained it, which is hilarious. They came, they saw me play, asked me, if I wanted a full scholarship, and I did one visit and I absolutely fell in love with it. Now, mind you, at the University of Cincinnati, this is the time that Kenyon Martin, Melvin Levitt, and Jermaine Tate were all there. And they were number one in the country.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
When I went there and I met everybody, I was like, this is where I need to be, because it was far enough from my parents that they couldn't just drop by, but it was close enough that they could come to all my games. So it was awesome.
One of the reasons that I chose the college I went to. Close enough for my parents to visit, but far enough away they needed to call first.
I was going to
Right.
say, shout out to
Perfect.
every teenager that's made that decision. It's like, where should I go to college? Oh, wait,
Yeah,
Yeah, you want that
exactly.
sweet spot, that Venn diagram, but you
somebody
gotta
right
call.
now is probably making that same decision. So,
So anyway, I got there my freshman year, and my freshman year I got sixth man, which basically that just means that you're the first person off the bench and
right.
you play almost as much as the starter sometimes. I did pretty good. My stats my first year were 5.6 points, 1.9 rebounds, and 2.9 assists. Here's the funny part, and I want every athlete to know this. When you go, it is going to be hard. You're going to get beat up every day. Nobody's going to feel sorry for you. And every teammate is coming after you because they don't want you to take their spot.
Right.
But you keep coming, you keep playing, and you play hard. And I ended up starting my sophomore year.
Oh, nice.
And it was great. My freshman year, we were conference champs, not in the tournament, but in the regular season.
In the regular season.
And we ended up losing in the conference tournament to the conference champs, Tulane. It was the final game. Oh, my heart was broken. 'Cause I'm like first year in college, and we could have been not just regular season champs, but also conference champs.
Did you make it to the NCAA tournament? Yeah.
We did. And I think the team we played was Iowa, which was hilarious because every girl on their team was like 6'1" and above. They were the biggest cornbread fed girls I had ever seen in my entire life. I was like, all of them are huge. Even their point guard. I was like, this is crazy.
I've known you for a while, Tish, and one thing I've noticed about you is that you are not 6'1".
Right? I am 5'7", and try boxing out a 6'1" girl that is as thick as any dude you've ever met. But anyway, it was a great experience. And because our guys were number one, because of NCAA rules, whatever they get, we get. And so, yeah, it was awesome. And the only thing we didn't get was they were wearing Jordans at the time and we were wearing Nike. But
it's
right,
yeah.
I'll take
Yeah.
Nike.
I grew up near Cincinnati, so this is post Bob Huggins. UC. This is after that, right?
Okay. No. This Bob Huggins was there.
Yeah, Bob
He was
Huggins
the
was
coach
there.
there.
Yeah,
Okay,
he was there doing.
he was still the
Hayden
coach.
Martin.
All right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Nice.
both years I was there, he was the coach.
Okay.
And the funny thing is everybody always talks about like he's mean and all this other stuff. He was so cool to us. Like literally, we could come and watch practice. We talked to him all the time. He was a really cool guy. All the guys on the team had a great relationship with him too. I mean, but any coach that's trying to make you great is going to also get on your nerves. So, that's just part of the game.
Yeah, the year they made it to the Final Four of the men's tournaments, living close to Cincinnati as they did, like a buddy of mine in high school drove over for the pep rally for that Final Four appearance. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. And we had some really awesome women that played for us, like Medina Slace. She ended up going overseas to play for a little while. And then she also played for the Detroit Shock.
Oh, nice.
I think for maybe 2 years. Kristen Sharp went and played overseas. I think Doris Scott also ended up playing overseas, but just a great group of girls. After my sophomore year, I went to visit my uncle in LA, and he was a lead evangelist in a church out in our church that I grew up in out there. And they asked me to come out and intern at UCLA campus ministry. And so I actually left my full scholarship to go and do that for 2 years. And my second year, I was at Pepperdine University. And the cool thing about that is Tia and Tamara, the twins for sister, they went there at that time. And I got to play basketball with Rob Schneider and who he makes all the movies. What's his name?
Adam Sandler.
Adam Sandler, yeah. And Adam Sandler's like total opposite of in the movies. Like he's so chill. Like
he's actually, from what I understand, a pretty good basketball player too.
Oh, he loves basketball. He absolutely loves basketball. I'm pretty sure that's what he does when he's not making a movie is play basketball. But they were really cool. And you get out there in Malibu, you get to see everybody. Like I got to see Tom Hanks and his family and just all kinds of stuff. People would drive Maseratis and limos to school. It's insane. But it was a great experience. I would say the hard part was I like to surf more than I like to go to class.
Oh,
So that made it tough. I literally still have nightmares about missing class because I was surfing. After that, I ended up moving to Jacksonville, Florida, and finished out my basketball career with University of North Florida. You know, my coach and my team, they were amazing. We actually went to the Elite Eight when I was there. I think we were also conference champs there. I'm not 100% sure, but it was just basketball in college was an amazing experience, you know, built-in sisterhood. It was awesome. My last year there, I was actually on a TV show called Ultimate Choice, and it was pretty cool. And we got to go to Georgia. We went skydiving, we went whitewater rafting, and just did a lot of other stuff. But basically, it's a show just about teenagers and college students, the choices that you have to make and
mhm.
how to make better ones. And then basically other people were able to learn from the bad choices we made, you know. And
And
it
I
was
want to say,
funny.
like, it's really impressive. Just I did a quick Google, and like 3% of high school basketball players, and it's like actually a little high, 3% go on to play in college, and that's for all basketball players. If
Yeah.
you break it out to women's basketball, it drops to like 1.2%.
Yeah, it's a low
So
percentage.
that's, as impressed as I was early on, that is now even more impressive to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Exceptional accomplishment to do it in two different places. It's so cool. And then to, like Brian said, I mean, you're part of a 1.1 percentage of ladies that go on to play women's college basketball, which is amazing. I mean, and it must be so proud, must make you feel so proud to see where the game is headed nowadays. You know, with the great players that we see with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and some of the others. I mean, it's amazing. I have to say, I've been a fan of WNBA since its inception over 25 years ago, more or less. But now it's like, I'm glad that people can see it on the mainstream and finally realize that, yeah, hey, we have a women's league that actually does pretty well and has pretty good basketball players. The game doesn't have to be all about dunks and trees. It can be about, you know, strategy, the way the women play it. So I really, really am happy for that. But I'm really happy to be able to hear your story because that's awesome.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
making the tournament twice,
Yeah,
that's
that's
super cool.
not a lot of people can say that they did that. So kudos.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a great experience. I would encourage every girl who, you know, just has a heart for basketball, just play as hard as you can. Because
Right.
I would not say that I was the most talented person playing basketball, but you were not going to outwork me. That was not going to happen. You know, I was going to give it everything I've got and like communicating on the court, cheering on your teammates, all of that. You know, if you just have a great attitude and you work as hard as you physically can, it's
Right.
definitely possible. I mean, it's funny that when you said that 1%, I was like, wow, I didn't know it was that little, you know,
Mhm.
that little amount, like percentage of people that would be able to play, you know, in college, but it's definitely possible, you know. So,
Yeah, I knew it was overall, it was like 5% or less, like, of high school athletes become college athletes. And then like I think 1% of that become professional athletes. I
Professional,
mean,
yeah.
it keeps paring down the higher you
Less and
go.
less,
But
yeah.
I was like, well, that's a general number that's floating around my head. What is it if you drill down deeper for men's sports, women's sports? And yeah, it's like it's about 3.6% of high school boys basketball players play in college, and it's 1.2 for high school girls basketball players. So
I can't imagine what the percentage is from that 1.2 that make it to the pros, especially when the women's pro basketball scene is so odd, for
yeah.
lack of a better term, because as you were mentioning, a lot of the young women that go into that world have to end up going overseas first to go play pro instead of coming here and playing here. I mean, the league itself now it's during the summer, which is good, but the amount of ladies that get selected to the league here in the US, it's got to be less than 1% from that percentage that Brian was talking about. So it's still a growing sport, obviously. I mean, it's still a growing genre in the sport. So we're just hoping that we can make it bigger. But Tish, it's been amazing to hear your story. It's honestly I think it's a great deal. So congratulations to you again. Thanks for sharing with us.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we're going to welcome Sarah Grady to tell us about the cool thing that she submitted when we made the call out. And I guess I should welcome you by saying konnichiwa.
Yes, konnichiwa.
And that's all I have to contribute.
Nice.
But yeah, tell us about the competition that you won, because when I read it, I was super impressed.
Yeah, so I learned about the competition in late 2022, and by that point, my chances of studying abroad were pretty slim thanks to COVID-19. So when I did hear about the contest and the fact that the prize were airplane tickets, I was pretty motivated to join the contest, even though I hate public speaking. So for my college and my category, we could only submit 3 students. So we had to have kind of a semifinal. Thankfully, I was chosen. And then March of 2023, I was able to participate and I got first place.
Excellent. Now, specifically, what was this competition?
The theme was connections, and I decided to speak about how music can connect people from all over the world, because I don't think it's something where you have to know the language to be able to, connect with others through music. And we had to make it 3 to 4 minutes. And I was talking to my professors for help, and one of them said, "Well, why don't you sing?" And I said, "No way. No way am I going to do that." But she thought that audience interaction would be really important. And I think that was the selling point of my speech. So I did the chorus of "If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands." And as soon as I said, "Yoku dekimashita," she did well, everyone was laughing. So I was excited that everyone was able to enjoy that.
So that brings up an important point and an important detail. As you mentioned before, like music, kind of spans a lot of things, even if you don't speak the language. But the speech competition that you won and that we're discussing was not in English.
Nope, not at all.
Yeah, you were speaking Japanese.
Yes.
Nice. Okay.
Yes. I guess I didn't mention that. Yeah, it's all in Japanese.
Getting up in front of people to talk, like you said, public speaking can be, a daunting enough of a task for many people. I think a lot of studies or polling, people put public speaking as a bigger fear than even death. And like, not only were you doing that, but you weren't doing it in English.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Cool.
I'll be honest. I completely blanked out the whole time. As soon as I finished, I didn't know what I had just said. I guess I was just frozen, but apparently I did well. So
Excellent. All right. Cool. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing that. And congratulations. How was the trip to Japan?
Oh, it was amazing. Yeah, it was exactly this time last year. I was in Japan for the first time. I went for 10 days with my mom. Of course, I had to speak the whole time. But yeah, it was really beautiful over there, and I can't wait to go again. So
excellent. Cool. All right. Well, again, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.
もしご存知であれば一緒に歌ってください。幸せなら手をたたこう。海も下ってそんなく。See you said it's somebody's and it's a call to say it up. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. わあ、上手でした。この世界は音楽でつながっています。大変な時にも嬉しい時にもその感情に合う歌があります。言語が分からなくても歌が持っているメッセージや雰囲気が分かると思います。つまり音楽は世界共通の言語です。
Joining us now for the Moser Humble Brag experience is Mark. Mark, your response was one of them that definitely kicked in my "oh damn" response. Very cool. And like as I was just telling you before I hit record, I used one of these this morning. So
yes.
Go ahead, humble brag away.
Okay, yeah. So the one that Brian used this morning is essentially if you have ever shipped a package through UPS and gone online to track your package, you pretty much use something that I've worked on. 25 years ago, when I was a college student, I had a 3 rotation co-op with United Parcel Service in Louisville, Kentucky. And one of the big projects that they had was they were doing a $1 billion expansion at the airport to put in an automated package sorting system. So packages would be pulled out of trucks, airplanes, etc., put on conveyor belts. It would scan the packages, and then through a series of conveyor belts and pucks that kind of slid packages off the conveyor belts into different chutes, and that would sort it and take it to the aircraft that it needed to be at. But in order for that all to work, something that's very important was having labels on the packages that had advanced features and a system that could track the packages throughout the whole facility. UPS already had package tracking from an internal perspective for quite a few years. The truck drivers had software and these digital devices where they could scan and say, hey, yes, this package was delivered, but being able to take it to a customer facing perspective, that aspect of here's my package tracking code. Where is it? Is it on a truck? Is it in the facility in Ontario or Chicago? How many days expected before I get it? That was a newer thing that we had added. One of the things that was also kind of cool about that project was back then we had this brand new aspect on our label. At the time, we called them maxi codes, but it's basically the QR codes that everybody uses now. That was a brand new thing 25 years ago. What was so great about it was you could put in a lot more information than what you could with a standard barcode. Packages had 3 codes on them. One of them was just embedded in your zip. Another one was the package barcode. And then the third one was this maxi one that had all of the information associated with it. One of the very cool things about it was, yes, people have used functionality that I was a part of creating all around the world. Maybe something more nefarious was I helped the company recover a lot of revenue for our big corporate customers. There was a little bit of a grace thing that we did with them, that it was an honor system of weigh your own packages, dimension them, figure out what you owe us, and then pay for it. That way they could just drop off a lot of packages. A common client for that was Gateway. If you remember all those Gateway cow boxes where people got computers in the mail, that all went through UPS. So it was an honor system. But you know what? People make mistakes. So part of that conveyor system was when a package came on, it would stop at a special scanner and it would dimension through lasers the package, and it would also weigh it. And then it would price the package in both ways. If you paid by weight or if you paid by volume, what should you have owed? And then we would determine whether they undercharged themselves and then send them a bill for the difference.
You mean my desktop computer did not weigh 6 ounces?
Exactly.
That's
So
weird.
that was a way to recover revenue. Of course, big customers had a tolerance we gave them due to the volume for being incorrect. But like each one of those scanner and weighing systems, I think cost $40,000 each, and each one paid for itself within 2 weeks. So it was
I was
something.
going to ask how long was the recoup window, and I bet it was pretty short.
It was definitely very short. So it was kind of a cool thing because it's helping the company. I mean, in the end, they're providing a service. They didn't want to, take more money from their customers than what they deserved. But at the same time, it was a business. So, I mean, that's part of the arrangement that you have. Here's the cost of service, and it's an agreement to pay for it. So that's one of the things that happened at UPS. Would you like to hear some of my other cool stuff there, Brian?
Yes, apparently you did some work for military aviation.
That is correct.
That is the other one that really tripped my oh damn reflex.
Yeah, it was something really cool. When I graduated from college, I moved from Louisville, Kentucky to Indianapolis, was looking for a job, and applied at several different places, but I'd gotten an interview with Northrop Grumman. They had a big project for an aircraft, the V-22 Osprey, subcontracted through Raytheon, that was for the avionics that was on the aircraft, as well as the mission planning software that the pilots used on the ground stations. For those that aren't familiar with the V-22 Osprey, it's a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. So it's got wings with prop rotors on them. They're big, they rotate in air. So what it can do is it can take off like a helicopter, essentially, and then in the air they rotate and they can fly like an airplane. So it's something that was an incredibly pivotal aircraft in like Iraq and Afghanistan, because with the environmental conditions, how hot it was, as well as the altitude, it could take off and land anywhere in the terrain, and it could have a bigger range than pretty much any of the helicopters. So they were able to move troops. They were able to medical evacuate troops as well as supplies, take care of a lot of different things. And when I got out of college, I started out in test, which for a lot of people who study to be a developer, like they're like, what? I wanted to write code. But I actually really recommend it, because if you start out in test, what you can do is really learn how the software is supposed to work very well, and then understand where it's not working right before you can actually go and change the code. It's a little dangerous to start changing the code if you don't know how it's supposed to operate. But with that, the experience that I got as a tester is within a year, like I knew more about how the system's supposed to operate than most of the people on the project. I moved to the position of lead requirements engineer, which in modern terms is very similar to product owner in agile terms. And then I really got to start working with the pilots more. A problem that they had, and this is kind of a common thing in the military, like you think military super high tech. There are some things that are, but when it comes to aircraft, a lot of aircraft are ones that have been out there for 40 or 50 years. And what the government is trying to do is eke another 10 out of it. So a lot of the tech is old, especially when you come to flight safety. Some of the stuff that we used was really like in the 1990s was like cutting edge, state of the art. But when I started working on it was in the 2000s. So like the thumb drive I had in my pocket had more memory than the entire aircraft. That's kind of how outdated it was. So we had to really kind of understand, what problems did the pilots have? How did they try to pre-plan their missions to make sure that they were executable, effective? They had enough performance. They had the power they needed to take off and land. They had enough fuel, but not too much fuel, because that's extra weight and then it becomes fuel efficient. A lot of missions, you had to be in a certain spot at a certain time and your tolerance was 10 seconds. So if you're doing a 2-hour flight, you have to be accurate within 10 seconds. We had to figure out how can we provide all of these planning capabilities to give them the success they need, but then work around a lot of the aircraft limitations.
Are you retrofitting, like say like an older C-130, like the avionics and onboard computers? So, okay, we have to do this and it's going to be better, but it also has to fit this established footprint within the aircraft, or less to fit more in. But I mean, you're working with something that exists, so you have to figure out how to get everything you want to add in there, right?
Yes, and I'll say it's a combo. I mean, it's kind of a standard thing. If you are ever doing, the typical process when it comes to product, where you start out with discovery and then you go into design. Discovery, you're trying to understand the problems, what outcomes do people want to achieve, but you also want to understand what constraints you have. Sometimes people throw artificial constraints out there. Sometimes they're real. Real ones are like, you only have 4 megabytes of memory to transfer data electronically. I can't make the aircraft have, better hardware when you have 250 aircraft in the fleet that has to go through a procurement process. I can't just change the hardware. All I can do is control software. So work within those limitations. But when it came to the ground system, we had a whole lot more capability than what the aircraft did. And that's what we tried to do, was make the pilots as confident as possible before they went up that they were going to be successful. That was an area where I learned that there's big differences in users right off the bat, because the aircraft supported both the Marines and the Air Force, and they had very different mentalities. Like the colonels that I worked with in the Marines would literally say, like, you have to Marine proof this, meaning they wanted to make sure everything was followed to a T, every calculation, you double checked everything for them. Air Force, it was really an Air Force special ops aircraft. And the Air Force pilots would just kind of look at you and go like, I'm not dumb. Get rid of all this kiddie proof stuff. Like, I just need to know it's close enough. And when I'm up in the air, I'm going to have to figure it out anyway, just because of how things change. So I just need to be confident that I can take care of the rest. So modeling software that helped both of them in the way that they needed to do was definitely a challenge. But I think kind of one of the things that I helped to deliver that I'm probably most proud of is we had created a airdrop planning tool. And the Marines called it aerial delivery, I believe, but the Air Force called it airdrop. So just kind of think of this. Let's say you have somebody behind enemy lines in Afghanistan. They're running out of supplies. You need to get them more supplies, but you can't land. So you're flying 3,000 feet up in the air, and what you're doing is you're pushing cargo supplies out the back and trying to get it to them and not in the enemy's hands.
Yeah, you don't want to accidentally, like, here, people that are trying to kill our guys have some more stuff.
Correct. Here's some bombs, here's some guns or food, like whatever it is. That was one example. Another one is like, let's say it's a medical evacuation situation. You have paramedics who are jumping out of the back of an airplane. They might be at 10,000 feet in the air. So we really had to kind of understand all the aerodynamics that came into play about how the aircraft flew, the drop zones and the landing zones that you went into, the ballistics of the different parachutes, how some of them have different drag, different quantity of them, how wind behaves differently at different altitudes. Take that all into account so that we could safely pre-plan for the aircraft. This is the direction you should be flying, these coordinates, this speed. Here's the window that you have. It might be 15 seconds. Once you have this green light, you have a 15-second window to push it out the back of the ramp, which that in itself is different for every aircraft, that ramp distance that you have, and have a calculation where they're confident that they're going to be able to get those supplies or those people as on point as you can be. When it's people, a lot of chutes nowadays, they're steerable. So the parajumpers, they'll go out there and they'll be able to change direction if the winds change and kind of get yourself there. But having that tool and kind of understanding what all those ballistics are, the aerodynamics, how to integrate it within the nature that they plan the routes that they fly anyway, be able to transfer that data to the aircraft. Like, that was a really cool thing that really delivered a lot of value. And I feel it saved lives. That's one of the things that I took a lot of pride in when I did work on the military software is there's a lot of brave men and women who are out there fighting for our freedoms, fighting for our lives, trying to make the world a safer place to live in. So I was able to take some of the talents that I have and try to keep them safe and bring them back home to their families. It's something that I was very proud of and look back fondly that I was able to help them help me, I guess you could say. I was so fortunate. I worked with lots of brilliant people on the program as well as pilots. I still think Colonel Anderson in Air Force Special Ops, who became a commander, is probably one of the most brilliant people I've ever met. Just the way that he was able to command so many different concepts and lead a room and really be user focused, as well as one of my mentors, Dave Heisler, who was a civilian working for the military. A lot of how I operate now and how I address problems comes from lessons that I learned from him. So I guess a couple shout outs to a couple influential people in my life there.
Very nice. Okay, cool. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us about this. It's really appreciated.
All right, and with us now is Chris, and Chris is going to share with us a story that I think is super cool. So I'm going to let Chris talk about it, but we're going to have some images to share on our YouTube. So when you're watching, hopefully you're watching this on YouTube, you're going to see some images of Chris. But Chris, how are you? Welcome to Ask You Anything.
I'm great, thanks. Good morning, guys. Yeah, what I wanted to share was that one of the things I've been doing for the last 10 or 11 years now, fundraiser for childhood cancer research through an organization called St. Baldrick's. I got involved with that through my son playing youth hocky here in the Indy area, and they were supporting it. And but I've continued on it individually. I think I've raised over $20,000 in my fundraising efforts. And basically what I do in the middle of January every year, I create a page through the St. Baldrick's site, and I reach out to my friends, family, coworkers, post things on social media, and basically just ask for a donation to St. Baldrick's. It's a fundraiser. I believe there's some tax, you get some tax benefit as well from doing it. And it's just been a, one of those things that I always say is that if my hair grows back, I think I'll keep doing it. So even though it comes in less and less every year, it still comes back enough to support the cause. So that's
and
what
if you're watching this, Chris is letting it grow right now.
Yeah, this is a couple months, and I'll grow it out until the middle of March. It'll get
wow.
pretty long.
And speaking of the middle of March, that's when you joined Moser, and he sent me a couple of photos, a prep and a final product. This is in fact what you looked like when you were interviewing for your position at Moser, and I'm going to share my screen, and if that doesn't really work, then I'll drop them in later in the edit.
Well, while you get that up, Brian, I'll share that I actually got the call from the recruiter the day after I did that and had to explain to him, if I come in, this is what I'm going to look like. And he said, no problem. I think I met with Jim and Derek in the first meeting. We talked for an hour straight. It was great. The next meeting was virtual, and it also went very well. I can see that now. So
There we go.
and the genesis of the coloring was a few years ago. My kids were like, Dad, you could probably spice up your fundraising if you just ask your friends, whoever gives the most money individually can pick the color of your hair. And I have teams, coworkers and friends and family and a couple card group I play with. Whichever group gives you the most money can pick the beard. So that's how that came about 3 years ago. And every year that number keeps going up as they get more as people get more competitive. And real quick on St. Baldrick's, what they do is they donate the money generated in each state or each area back into the local community of researchers and doctors and such. So it doesn't go out of state. It stays in state through grants and research funding for doctors and researchers who have that going on. So that's
awesome.
If you're watching this on YouTube, look down in the episode description underneath it, and there will be a link to St. Baldrick's down there with some of the other stuff we've talked about.
How long does it take you to actually take all of that color away?
It actually, we shave it off and help. It
Okay.
actually there's a barber I've been going to in Carmel. He actually donates the time for free. He's been doing it for
Nice.
10 years, even at the
Nice.
hockey rinks and stuff. So he does that for me. And basically, occasionally I'll have a little dye on my head that scrub it off. Yeah, by the time the beard comes off, it's pretty much washed out. So I keep the hair for a week and I keep the beard for 2 weeks.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome, guys.
And up next, we got Adiola, and he's going to be explaining to us this project where he had two very much geographically separate data centers that they somehow put together. As you know, I'm not a tech guy, so I'm going to let Adiola take over and explain to us what he did. So here's Adiola.
So getting the assignment, designing, building, was like in order for initial presentation, you said was 2 months?
Is basically for me is around 2 to 3 months. Yeah.
Okay. And then
Wow.
then you have to do the migration to make sure it's going to work in place.
Yeah.
So 2 to 3 months initial setup and building. Since then, how long did the integration and then kind of figuring things out after that take?
I would say the pre-preparation, I joined February 19, although I was pre-informed during my interview that there is a project. Okay, I was excited. It's part of, okay, bring it on. So then by March, the VP reached out. This is what they want me to focus on. Okay, I took it up, and that took me maybe 2 to 3 months, get everything clear, meet with the team lead for the network designs, network implementation, network person, which is Jason Coleman. Reach out to him to understand what you have in mind. Then we started the actual implementation. That should be back in around May. We went to the data center, setting up the boxes, racking stuff up, rack up, install. We completed that for maybe a month or and a half. Then we went to to Flint. We completed that as well. The Flint was more like we did that within a week. I drove down, got there. I walked throughout the clock to ensure that the objective was set it up so that it can be managed remotely. That was achieved within that week, and I left back. And then we started, from India, we started the integration together. We continue with the integration. and which requires ensuring a dynamic exchange between the two data centers. That was perfected and completed, I think, towards June, July. And then come September was the actual migration going live. So that September, was it September 14? Yeah, it took us, and that's pre-September 14, we've also worked with some of our team members who will be going on different sites, remote sites, because this remote site needs to come, they need some new equipment that needed to be installed there. So during that, September 14 was Saturday, yeah. So we worked 14, 15, waiting to ensure that the integration was, by 14, the integration was completed against 15, 14, 15. By 16, we started working with different folks at different remote location, and ensuring the communication from there to the data center is working fine. And I also need to add this, not just the data center, we also integrate this data center to the cloud. They have services in Azure. So we set up, there's an express, a direct connectivity between the data center and Azure. So all this basically brought together in a one single communication network.
Oh, wow.
Adiola, thanks very much for sharing all that with us. We certainly appreciate it. That's a job well done.
Yeah, that's a lot, and not a lot of, that doesn't sound like a lot of time to do that. Very cool. All right. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate you taking the time to take us through it.
Thank you for listening in to this week's episode of Ask Anything presented by Moser Consulting. We hope you enjoyed listening to our humble brag episode. Be sure to join us next time as we dive even deeper with our resident experts and explore what they're currently working on. Don't forget to share your ideas or topics with us on our social media feeds. In the meantime, please remember to give us a rating and subscribe to our feed wherever you get podcasts. Until then, so long, everybody.
Go.